Today I will be working in my workbook called Opening the Curtain into the Psalms, which covers Psalms 22 to 31. Today we'll be working on Psalm 29, which is titled Praise to God in His Holiness and Majesty. And that's a title that was given later. It didn't come with the psalm. But it's just easier to have titles with these things. So I've included it, but it was not part of the original psalm. Now, if this was the first psalm in this workbook, I would be going over this in detail, but it's not. So if you want to read this, go ahead and stop the video and read this. But this is a general study on psalms, separating the psalms into groups, musical nature of the psalms. Usually most of these will show up in the scriptures that we're seeing here. And then the poetic features of the Psalms, which I will talk about when we happen to hit them in the Psalms. Now we're going to go to Psalm 29. Psalm 29, praise to God in His holiness and majesty. Psalm of David. Ascribe to the Lord, you heavenly beings. Ascribe to the Lord glory and strength. Ascribe to the Lord the glory due His name. Worship the Lord in the splendor of His holiness. The voice of the Lord is over the waters. The God of glory thunders. The Lord thunders over the mighty waters. The voice of the Lord is powerful. The voice of the Lord is majestic. The voice of the Lord breaks the cedars. The Lord breaks in pieces the cedars of Lebanon. He makes Lebanon leap like a calf, Syrian like a young wild ox. The voice of the Lord strikes with flashes of lightning. The voice of the Lord shakes the desert. The Lord shakes the desert of Kadesh. The voice of the Lord twists the oaks and strips the forest bare. In His temple, all cry glory. The Lord sits enthroned over the flood, and the Lord is enthroned as king forever. The Lord gives strength to His people. The Lord blesses His people with peace. With every psalm, I'm giving some general commentary before we get into the deep dive of looking at the psalm itself. And I've taken several authors that have made comments. This psalm is part of the first book of Psalms. There are 5 books of Psalms. The NIV Study Bible states that Psalm 29 is a praise to the King of creation. It is part of a group of Psalms 25 through 33 that share common themes of pleas for mercy, confessions of trust, and celebration of God's unfailing love. According to Jameson, Fawcett, and Brown, Psalm 29 is a praise for God's general attributes. According to J. Vernon McGee, Psalm 29 is a voice of the Lord in a thunderstorm. Historically, since David doesn't specifically tell us when it was written, Bible scholars can disagree. For Psalm 29, the Blue Letter Bible believes that this was written near the end of David's life and places it after David tells the people his plans for the temple. The Nelson Chronological Bible has it written by David after he brings the ark to Jerusalem, before he tells the people his plans for the temple. Both are high top moments for David, so either could be true. The only heading that was given with the psalm was that it was a psalm of David. Although the word that translates as of could mean about and not by, this could mean that someone else wrote it about David or like him in style rather than him writing it. However, this psalm appears to be written by David. Many believe he wrote it as he watched a thunderstorm. This psalm can be split into 3 groups. The first section is called to worship, verses 1 through 2. The second section is graded the voice of the Lord, verses 3 through 9a. The last section is glory to the Lord, verses 9b through 11. Okay. The most dramatic poetic structure David uses in this psalm is repetition. The first section is called Call to Worship, verses 1 and 2. 3 times in verses 1 and 2, David uses the same phrase. What is it? Ascribe to the Lord. The phrase "the Lord" will be used throughout the psalm. How many in these two verses? 3 times. No, 4 times. In verse 1, who does David tell to ascribe to the Lord? Heavenly beings. In other translations, this is translated mighty ones. Verses 1 and 2, what all does he tell the mighty ones to ascribe to the Lord? Glory and strength, the glory due his name, the splendor of his holiness. The second section, great is the great voice of the Lord, verses 3 through 9a. There's a phrase that David repeats 7 times in these verses. What is it? 3 through 9a. The voice of the Lord, the voice of the Lord, the voice of the Lord. Yeah, that's what it is. It is in these verses that commentators believe that David was watching a thunderstorm or was thinking of a thunderstorm when he was writing this. Here are some indications. The Lord over the mighty waters, thunders over the mighty waters. The voice of the Lord is powerful and majestic. The Lord breaks in pieces the cedars of Lebanon. The voice of the Lord strikes with flashes of lightning. The voice of the Lord strips the forest bare. The cedars of Lebanon are symbolic of strength, majesty, and righteousness, and were highly valued for their wood. They were used to construct significant buildings like the temple, served as a metaphor for prosperity, and are compared to righteous people who are strong and deeply rooted in God. The deserts of Kadesh refers to the wilderness of Zin, where the biblical city of Kadesh, also called Kadesh Barnea, was located. This region was a primary encampment for the Israelites during their wanderings after the Exodus, and it was here that the spies were sent to scout the Promised Land. The area is considered a sacred site and a place of both spiritual significance and judgment for the Israelites. Verse 6 is different than the rest, sort of an island in the storm. Here David uses personification, giving animal characteristics to things, as well as synonymous parallelism, saying the same thing in different ways. How is he giving animal characteristics to nature? Verse 6. Lebanon is leaping like a calf, and Sirion is leaping like a wild ox. If Lebanon and Sirion are mountains, how is David using synonymous parallelism? They both are jumping like calves or wild oxes, so it says similar. The country of Lebanon is a very mountainous country with 2 mountain ranges that run parallel to its coastline, the Lebanon Mountains and the anti-Lebanon Mountains. Sirion is an ancient name for Mount Hermon. Just like heavenly beings is interpreted as mighty ones in other verses, so too desert is also translated wilderness. However, the wilderness in the Bible is a desert. In verse 8, however, while some translations interpret the end of verse 9 as twist the yokes, others translate it as make the deer give birth. Not sure which one works better here. The third section is glory to the Lord, verses 9b through 11. Again, the use of repetition. What phrase is used 4 times in verses 10 through 11? The Lord, the Lord, the Lord, the Lord. There's a word used twice in both verses as well. But there is a word that used twice in both verses as well. What is the word used twice in verse 10? Enthroned. Sorry. What's the word used twice in verse 11? People. Okay. Verse 9b is a sort of conclusion to all the verses before it. Who is to cry glory from verse 1? The heavenly beings, and all his temple, all cry glory. So verse 4 gives us a summary of verses 3 through 9a. Why are we to cry glory to the Lord based on this verse? Because the voice of the Lord is powerful and majestic. Verses 10 and 11 give us four characteristics of the Lord. They are: the Lord sits enthroned over the flood. He is enthroned as king forever. The Lord gives strength to his people. The Lord blesses his people with peace. Well, Psalm 29 is not directly quoted verbatim in other parts of the Bible. Its themes and language are echoed and referenced throughout the Old and New Testaments, particularly in passages that describe God's power through storms, thunder, and his majesty. The Jews used Psalm 29 in various liturgical contexts, including as a praise psalm sung during the Sabbath service, recited when returning the Torah to the ark, which it doesn't exist, but the temporary ark, and incorporated into the Kabbalat Sabbat, welcoming the Sabbath ceremony. It's also included in prayers for specific holidays like Sukkot and Shavuot. So that's the end of this video. And so I hope you enjoyed it. I hope you'll continue with our series on the Psalms.